a solo un tap en tu teléfono.
Le quitaste el volumen.
¿El qué?
Le quitaste el volumen a tu teléfono.
Pangea Plus. Creciendo con Pangea. Esto es Pangea Plus.
La moda sostenible. Reciclar, intercambiar, reutilizar y ayudar a proteger el planeta. Bienvenidos a María Arrieta en Vivo, con Carolina Chávez y María Ivette Durán, por Pangea Plus.
Buenos días.
Good morning, everybody. We are transmitted live from Miami at the Pangea Studios Plus at our program María Arrieta Live, news of sustainable fashion with my collaborator María Ivette Duran, and at the microphone Carolina Chavez. How are you, María? Good morning. Good morning, Caro. Very happy again. Wednesday, my best day of the week, and happy to be here with you with the microphones in María Arrieta Live. As always, we are inviting you to listen to us so you can follow us and invite everybody, all your friends and family members, to download the app Pangea FM, and so you can hear us through Pangea Plus. Also, you can follow us in the social media. We're in Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We are in every single social media. There's no excuse for you not to listen to us. We are also in YouTube in our videos. We also have voiceover, which means that you can also listen to it in English, simultaneous traduction in English, if you prefer to listen to it in English. And we would like to invite you to subscribe to our page, because all Tuesdays we're sending an email with all the news, the resources of the topics that we're talking about in the program of the last program. Well, it's www.mariaarrieta.net. Be here with us and continue sharing this information. If we have any important information for you, you can share with everybody, with all your friends. We're very sure that you guys are going to love it. Likewise, we would like to invite you. This space is yours. It's not only ours, it's from everybody. This platform, this microphone. The intention, the whole purpose of this is for everybody to participate. We are the channel so everybody can hear us and watch us in YouTube. That's right. Well, the topic that we have today is the International Women's Day. We're going to celebrate it, and we're going to be talking about very interesting things of the origin of this movement. Where is this coming from? Where is purple coming from? What does it mean? Where does the topic of textile begin? So stay with us. First, we're going to share. We have already talked about the Sustainable Development Goals. And number 5 is the one that talks about gender equality, which is basically putting together everything that women have been asking for centuries, so that we can be considered the same thing as men, talking about work. So we're going to begin with a reference that I really loved. Talking about textiles, this topic begins in the Neolithic 40,000 years ago, when women realized, when they started to use all the things that had in hand, like fibers from plants and trees. Some very creative woman started to knit and put everything together, all these fabrics together, and she realized that she could do strings, and from those strings made she could make fabrics.
empezó a poder hacer telas.
It started to become useful. One of the things, for example, was that they started to create the net so that men could fish more effectively, and a lot more things, much more things. But the interesting thing here is, why them? Why women? Why did women start to develop all this textile topic? Because men would go out and hunt, and women stayed at home taking care of the kids. So by watching the kids, they started to create all these things. And it was an activity, first of all, that they could share with the kids, because it was a very safe activity that it wouldn't represent any danger. And second of all, because they could share it with other women, and they could stop to do other house chores and come back to do the textiles. Nothing happened. Food was not burning. They could just stop and go back to do their other things. They could continue. So imagine all of these. It goes back to the Neolithic era. From there, they started to move, because these civilizations would move in order for them to find food. And when the Ice Age was finishing, the animals started to move again also. So these civilizations didn't follow the food, because animals were with them. So animals were getting there. So they realized that the fur from animals would serve for them to use to cover themselves, because back then it was the pure fiber. In places in Europe, the winter was very cold, so they realized, and it was great, that they could use the fur from animals to cover themselves. Also, the bones from certain animals, they could use them as needles. And they realized that by making the hole every time smaller, they could put together these threads that they had created with this fabric, and put these fabrics all together so they can make them even bigger. And that's how it started to evolutionate, that this is the origin of the textile topic, that it was definitely created by women. Very nice story, very inspiring to know where this is coming from, and what is the role of women, why is the role of women so important through all the life, and how the support that has been given to men. And like you were mentioning, they were hunting, and women were doing something very important for them, and basically confectioning clothes. And it starts in the Neolithic era. Like we were saying in the last program, and like we're mentioning today, the International Women's Day, we wanted to tell you the story. Why and where does this day come from? This day begins in 1908, when workers of needles, they were marching in New York. They were marching, protesting for the abuse of child work, and obviously to ask for more value in their job. It was a work fight in the United States. It was basically for men only. Men were in the process of this fight of asking for a better working conditions, and women were always supporting them, but they could see that there was no change, talking about their working part. At this time in 1908, women decide to form their own unions, because they were only supporting the men union, but they didn't have their own union. So they decided, and they said it's time to get separated and get our own union. A very, very well decision. So we're going to tell you that the first strike in the textile sector was in 1820, when women were working in the making clothes in New England, they go out and ask for their working conditions to have better wages and shorter schedules. We see this through history because in the number of hours that they were working was a lot. It was really strict. I guess that's the word. Like Carolina was saying, we're in the 21st century and we still have abuses. The most famous strike was in the cotton Lowell fabric in Massachusetts. Right here, the young women were working. This number is going to be very incredible. They were working 81 hours per week for only $3. It was very little money, and they would also, with that salary, they would also live inside the company. They organized all the time so that they could work there. They had to pay their own food, and they had to pay for staying there. So what money were they had left? It was a big abuse. And something more terrifying was that the managers that were managing these women, they realized that they realized when the women were having breakfast at 7 in the morning, so they had less energy. Let's say that they were more comfortable or something. Eh, I eat breakfast and I feel really calm. So guess what they did? They didn't have permission to have breakfast, and at 7, that was the old schedule. They would give them only half an hour to have breakfast so they can continue their work. So let's see, if they were doing strike, it was not that were not valuable. It was because they were really exploded. 14 years after this, in 1834, after a lot of wage shortage, women are tired and they go out again and they go to the streets, and then they create this slogan singing. I'm not gonna sing, but they told me that I was singing. They told me that I couldn't sing. This happens in. It was in the 1800s. They say that they go out and they come back. We're not gonna work. They go back to work and they have less salary. So then in 1836 they go out to the streets and they create this slogan which became really famous. And it's not a shame that a pretty girl like me has to go to a company to disappear and die. And it was a reality. It was not something made up. It was their reality, and it was really sad. Well, it is really good to know the story of all this, because definitely now that we're celebrating the Women's International Day, that all women receive a lot of congratulations. But now, really, I have become aware, Carolina, I'm going to still celebrate with everything, and for all the women around the world that have been sacrificed and have been fighting for equality, especially working equality. And now that we're talking about this textile industry, this is really important to be aware where this Women's International Day comes from. It was not because they were pretty or for being a mom, it's because of the abuse of the working conditions that they were living in. Following the story, I give you the word, Carol. That's right. Chronologically speaking, to know where these dates coming from, where the color comes from, all this movement. In 1844, all this organization of women creates the Feminine Working Reform Association, and this is where the first time some adjustments are made, but not enough, not even close to what it's the best, but at least they got a little bit of attention. After these, they have the Civil War, which was between 1861 and 1865. And after this period, a big number of women they start working because there was a lot of necessity because a lot of men didn't come back from war, unfortunately. They are forced to go to work, so this creates a lot of panic and hostility from men. So women start to form and reunite more and to create bigger unions. In this occasion, they also get together with the Order of the Knights of Saint Crispin, which was a shoe union. They start getting together every time more and more. And at this time, during this time, they get together with women working at cigarettes fabrics. 51 years later, after the march of the women that were working, creating clothes, which was in 1857, March 8th, their sisters of these needle working women in New York, they were marching in 1857, which was March 8th, asking for voting and exploitation in these fabrics and these companies, and always basically asking for the same rights. And in this time, the police broke this march and it was over. So these workers, creating clothes workers, have created the most important unions, and basically the one of the International Union of the Working of the Making Clothes Ladies, which was founded in the 1800s. These fabrics of the big cities were really, really poor. There were a lot of risks, fire risks, very continuously. They couldn't go to the bathroom only by asking permission. The light, they didn't have enough light. It was the sound of the machines was very loud. Everything was very contaminated. It was very dirty. The women were charged of money if they were laughing or crying, if they were talking, singing, if they got any part of the clothes dirty, they would be charged for everything. Also, they were required to work overtime almost all the time. And of course, they didn't get paid for that. So, 3 years after this, in 1903, thanks to the support of the Women Union League, two big companies, very important companies in New York, Laserson and Company and Triangle Waste Company, they rebelled again, and these actions finished as the first long-term strike because it lasted 13 weeks. They were decided they wanted a change, and it was 13 weeks of strike. I can just imagine the owners of this company, but they deserved it. And also, they also got something else because this happened in the winter. It didn't matter that it was in winter. Women between 16 and 25 years old, they were also imprisoned, and some of them also died because it was really cold. They were very young. So it was really, really a strike from the heart, from the soul, because they wanted to have a change. But like you were mentioning, police arrived. They were damaged. They were hurt, and they would put them in jail. This great big strike, which lasted 13 weeks, it was called Uprising of the 20,000. It was very, very important. It was a big impact worldwide. and how they reacted to this strike because it became a political problem, a social and legal problem. So what happens? What did the courts say? Well, they didn't support women. In fact, they were with they were protecting all these companies because they had the money power, like as always has been happening. The minority, the problem of women, the big companies that have all this power in politics and the government. So the courts and the judges, they were only criticizing women, saying that these strikes were against God because the principal law of the men was getting money, earning money because of their work. Yes, it was by working work, but not with the women's blood. They were not supported. They made a big protest, but there was no support. In March of 1908, cotton workers of New York, they stopped working to protest of the working conditions. And again, talking about those conditions, they never changed. Low salaries, very long working shifts, very bad working conditions. There was overcrowding. They were getting diseases. A lot of women were dying because of the diseases, because diseases were transmitting very easily. When they go out in 1908, these women said, if this doesn't work, now we're going to lock up ourselves inside the company until our voice is heard. So this is what I'm going to tell you. Everybody, all the women were protesting, peacefully protesting in this company. This company gets on fire and all these women died. So this was never clarified. They don't know how this fire started. They didn't matter, and this was silenced. Since then, what Carolina was mentioning, talking about purple, the color, why this Women's International Day is this color. It's because of all this fire where all these women die. You have the information, I think. All this smoke was coming out purple, apparently because of the uniforms or because of the fabric that they were working on at that time. But the fire never stopped. When the fire stopped, the smoke was still coming out. Was coming out purple. So it gives me the chills to realize that it was because of the sacrifice of all these women, and we never knew what happened to them. So this is one of the theories, because of the smoke was coming out purple. The other theory was that the textile they were using was purple. It's called mauve, like a type of purple, that in celebrating this, commemorating this fire and all these women that die, that's why we started to use purple. We have that in 1910 in a Congress of the Socialist Party in Germany that was called the Second International. The Germany socialist Clara Zetkin, she asked all women, she asked that March 8th would be celebrated the Women's International Day. This was a convocatory. It was nothing official yet. This date was decided to have purple as a symbol color of this movement. And you wanted to say how they were, because she was called in Germany. Of course, the Kaiser would call her the most dangerous witcher in the empire. Imagine these women that protested for the rights of all women. So that's how we were considered, as we were going against God, as witches, the most dangerous for the empire. Well, her opposition was really strong. We have that 1 year after this strike of the uprising of the 20,000, there was another fire fire of the shirts triangle fabric, which was in 25 of March in 1911, women died because they were trapped in the upper floors. They were locked so that they wouldn't escape, because a lot of women were immigrants, so that they wouldn't escape. They wouldn't go to shorten their working hours. They would lock them. So there was another fire. 193 women die. 123 women and girls, and 23 men. Most of these women between 13 and 25 years old. And like I already mentioned, most of them were immigrants. The majority of them were Jews and women from Italy also. So imagine how this topic was in the courts, that the employers, the owners, were asked to pay a fine. We were talking about that the women get paid $3 a month of a salary, and for these fires, basically were created because of the really bad conditions of these buildings. They were asked to pay $20 as a fine. So obviously, there was always a woman, again, very brave woman, that says this is really unfair. So this girl was Rose Schneiderman, which was the organizer of the women working industry, to support these types of conditions, to support these types of laws. The truth is that of not protecting women. We're talking about girls, we're talking about women, of not protecting. This is not happening anymore. So this created a big movement, and she realized that she would say that the only way to save was getting together. She was supporting a lot the movement of the unions, of the women together. So she was asking for women to get together, because one by one we're going to be disprotected. What they would say is for them to get together more and more, so that these movements would be stronger every time. There are a lot of very meaningful women in all these union fights, but the truth is that everything has been accomplished thanks to women, all of the women that we're not gonna know, never gonna know their names, that are never gonna go out in the newspaper with a big important biography. But all this movement, we're talking about between the 1800s and 1900s. We still need to talk about this coming century. Everything was accomplished of thanks to women of unknown names. Okay, so now let's talk about let's go on a little bit in history. For example, a very curious fact that almost nobody knows was that the Russian Revolution, one of the things that was like a trigger for this revolution, that was also a big movement, was also a strike of women in the textile industry. So starting from here, they started celebrating days, Women's Day here and there, but nothing official yet. It's not like right now that we have it as a clock. It's celebrated every year. So we have that women in China, they started to celebrate in 1924, at the same time as a very strong women in the Chinese Communist Party, when liberation women movement started in the United States. United Kingdom, the day of the day was rediscovered and relived as a feminist party. We also say that the fight that they were having were like trying to
esta frase que
erase
tal vez todavía podamos
this
escuchar que
phrase
dicen que el
that
lugar de la
maybe
mujer,
you can
¿no?
probably
¿Cuál es el
hear it
lugar de la
again,
mujer? O
that the
sea,
place of the women. What is the place of the women?
sí, o la
Um,
casa, o,
it's
¿no? O
like
sea, no se
staying at home,
reconoce
or
a la mujer
a
al día de
woman is
hoy.
not
Estamos
recognized.
hablando de que todo
Up
este
until
movimiento
today,
se
we're
empezó a
talking
hacer
about
hace,
that
no sé,
this movement
200
started
años.
about, I don't know, 200
Todavía,
years
todavía
ago,
las mujeres son muy subestimadas.
and still are
No se valora
underestimated. Women
la
are
creatividad, la
underestimated.
fuerza,
Their
¿no?
creativity, the
Que existe.
strength of women
Entonces,
is not valued, is not
después de una huelga textil
is
famosa en el
recognized.
Lawrence, que ya habló
After
María
this very
antes,
famous
estas mujeres
textile
salieron
strike
con
of
con
Lawrence,
una
that
pancarta,
Maria
porque
talked
no
about
sé
this
si sepan,
before,
pero
these
todas
women
las
came out
marchas del Día de la Mujer
with
tienen
this
un
big board. I don't
específico
know if you knew
mensaje,
this, but all
¿no?
these
Esto obviamente se
marches
instituyó muchos
of
años después,
Women's
pero
Day
todas
have a
las
very
marchas tienen
specific
un mensaje
message.
bien
So
específico.
this
Y
message would
esta
say
marcha
that
decía
we wanted
queremos pan
bread and
y
flowers. This,
flores.
which
Esto quiere
means
decir, lo que
for them, this
significaba
means
para
for them
ellas es
they
que
wanted a fair
querían un
salary, but
salario
also
justo, pero
human
también
conditions
condiciones
in order
humanas
for them to
para
live
poder subsistir.
in the right way.
¿Correcto?
So let's go to 20th
Vamos al siglo
century,
XX,
Maria.
María.
You'll say we're changing century, there's probably a big change. Well, no, there was no change. There was no big change. Protests were still going on in the United States. There were protests in all the categories of the industry, but especially in the textile workers. There were they were creating these movements because they really had really bad conditions in the 20th century. They were working 65 hours. These were the normal hours for these people, and when these hours were extended depending on the times of the years, depending on how many clothes they have to turn in, they will go up to 75 hours. In New York City, the production of clothes in the first decade, it was divided in the first decade. There were 600 shops and fabrics having even 30,000 workers and earnings approximately for the companies of $50 million. So these big earnings, the companies were getting a lot of money, mistreating and abusing their workers, and even up until today. In spite of these short salaries, a lot of these workers, very often, this is very incredible, not only having really bad working conditions, not healthy working conditions, but they would also ask them to take their own working material. They had to take their own thread, their own needles, and their own sewing machine. Like if it was not enough, can you let me work, and can you also get me paid for letting me work? It was a very big abuse, and we're talking about the 20th century. In some working places, like the Triangle Shirtwaist Company, they used steel doors, Caro, so that they can lock up the workers and so that they can avoid for them to take some rest. Women would have to ask permission to go to the bathroom, and a lot of the times they wouldn't be allowed, and there were a lot of health problems because of that. This was the 20th century slavery, in my way of seeing. We were also talking about the fashion industry when this was represented by immigrants. And the women immigrants were 50% of these women were Jews. The other 3% were Italian women. What's happening is that the Jew women, they were talking already about, in their countries, they were talking about the human rights, and they knew what were the human conditions to be able to work in this country. So they started saying, this is not right. We're talking about illegal conditions, and we're trying to work in a country as immigrant, and we're not allowed to fix this problem or all these rights problem. They were more familiarized with these unions, so by the time that they get here and they see these conditions, they know this language a little bit more. We were talking about the number that 70% of these women working force, approximately half of these were 20 years or younger. Very young women, girls, basically. So we see with these we see that also Jew women had like a very important part in this topic because they really wanted to say with the experience, with the knowledge that we already know, that we already have, they knew how this union were working, so they had a big support. I have a very interesting fact. It says that November 22nd of 1909, Clara Lemley, after hearing 4 hours and a half, after hearing a man talking for 4 hours and a half, talking about the men's rights and the union and this and that, she goes to the podium. We are here at this conference, and she goes to the podium and says Yiddish, that in his language, native language, means to start a strike right there. So obviously, all women, all the people got crazy because finally somebody with value, with courage in her language, a woman in her language, stands up and does something. So less than one day that this strike was declared, in November 24th, 15,000 workers of t-shirts came out of the fabrics. More people got together with this strike, and this strike lasted from February of 1910 until November of 1910. And that's where it ended with a protocol of peace and allowing these strikers to go back to work and satisfy their demands, which include less hours, equality in the treatment of workers, with the workers that were in the union and the ones that were not. So finally, we start to see a little bit of loss, a little bit more support in all this topic of the textile industry. We have some important dates that I would like to mention because these are gonna give us some chronological order until we get to the Women's International Day, because we already know that the very first strike was on March 8th, so it started to be celebrated 50 years later, so that we celebrated this day. So let's see when this started to be celebrated. It says right here that in 1910, in the second Socialist Women International Conference in Copenhagen, it was reestablished the demand of the universal voting, that all these women could vote. The proposal of Clara Zetkin that she also proclaimed in March 8th as the International Women's Day in 1910. In 1911, it was celebrated the very first time, the International Day, in Germany, Austria, Denmark, and Switzerland. These, 6 days after that this Women's Day was celebrated in the other side of the world is when the United States fire happens of this company that you were talking about, where 123 women die and 23 men die. So this event makes to have more consequences, to pay more attention to the problem of risk in the working conditions. Not only this wakes up to pay more attention to the working condition, not only the salaries or the schedule, the working hours, but the conditions of these companies they were working on. And It says right here that this event had great consequences, and the celebrations after this of the Women's International Day, they were making reference to these working conditions. The women in Russia started to celebrate the very first Women's Day, the last Sunday of February in 1913. Right here, we have to mention that the system gives them the day, International Women's Day, but you have to go to work. So, a few years later, I have the date here, until May 8th of 1965, it becomes a no working day. That's nice. It's the Women's Day, but if you don't come to work, then you get in trouble. In China, for example, they start celebrating in 1922. In Spain, in 1836. In Mexico, and I mentioned this because we start to celebrate in 1960. It is the Civical Day of Women, and it was celebrated February 15th. So you start seeing like sales all around the world, but really it's not unified yet in one single day. In the United States, it's already mentioning because they are referring to other march in Europe to commemorate these the women that die in these. They make these proposals. Little by little are being accepted and they're being declared, and other countries start to celebrate. But it is until 1960 there was no International Women's Day, global level. No, a lot of countries were celebrating because all these countries have denominated this to losing some years, but individually, not like the one we saw this last Sunday that was at the global level. So let's refer a little bit towards. We have already talked about what happened before. Let's see, Maria, she's going to tell us some numbers, how these things haven't changed really. They have only translated to other countries, but the problem is not very big here, but the problem still exists in the same levels probably, but in other parts of the world. Right. We're going to tell you what is happening right now. There hasn't been a lot of change, but it's been translated, and this problem has reached other places in inequality. This topic is incredible. I'm going to give you some important numbers where clothes fabrics that are workers that are exported to the United States are Bangladesh and Cambodia, and they have the lowest salaries. I'm going to tell you that the salary in Bangladesh is $68 a month. So, but also in what are the conditions? We have already mentioned this. We don't want to repeat this, but it's exploitation. The working environment is not healthy. This is very worrying. There are a lot of diseases, and they still have to work. If one is absent, and well, somebody else is gonna come, but it's really incredible. In Cambodia, $120 a month. In Thailand, they get paid $9, which means $234 each month. They get paid more in Thailand compared to the other two countries, but it's also very low. In India, we have that the salary is between 20 and 52 euros each month. By the end of the 20th century, there were a lot of important changes in this clothes market. The main producers and exporters have changed. So what you were mentioning, some are exporting, some other are importing. So what happens with this? The economy, the problem is that it's moving from depending where this is working, where they are working. For example, a very clear example is that in 1970, the main exporters in the United States was Japan, United Kingdom, Canada, Italy, France, These are the most important. There are others, but these are the most important. And by 2011, we move like from 1970 and to 2011, the majority the United States gets from China, Cambodia, Pakistan, Mexico, Bangladesh, with others. These are the most important. But the problem continues of childish exploitation and really low working conditions. So a lot new countries are getting in here, the countries that are exporting to the United States. So the problem is moving, but we're not seeing any solutions. It continues right now. The general production has been moving to the third world. It is concentrated in Asia. Also, there are also some countries that are not Asian, like Panama, Chile, and Egypt. So they're getting in some countries in this market, unfortunately adopting these really bad working conditions. Countries like Turkey, Morocco, and Tunis have become key actors talking about exportations towards the United States, to Asia and the European Union. Well, we're talking about the same topic. Nothing changes. So we see here that 70% of the workers of this industry are women. We still see that the working conditions are really bad. Some years ago, this topic, what I'm going to mention, this topic is for a whole program. Some years ago, in a fabric in Bangladesh got on fire, and from there, there's this movement that starts that it's called the fashion revolution, because everything that is happening in the United States in the 1800s and 1900s at the beginning, the same thing is happening, the same thing. It's just that now the international community, it's much more involved. Also because of the social media communication, we can find out about a lot of things. Also, a lot of women died, and by the time that they went to see where this fire happened, they found out a lot of etiquettes from brands of clothes that we all use. So I mentioned this because we need to realize that nothing has changed. Only geographically, the problem is located in other place. But the Fashion Revolution Week is coming soon, celebrating specifically this anniversary of this big tragedy. And obviously, this day we're going to tell you a lot more detail about this. Another thing that we wanted to mention was that the women that are suffering of more disequality are the native, the indigenous women, not just because of women, but also more for being indigenous. So we're talking about, for example, of in Latin America has millions and millions of indigenous people in all their countries, basically concentrated in Mexico and Peru. 8.7 million of women, indigenous women in Mexico, and 3.3 million in Peru. What happens with these indigenous communities? Why are these so important? All the work that these indigenous women do, we're going to focus in the textile topic, but all the work that they do is they're using the resources that they have around them. The system is not a capitalist system, it's a community system. So they don't waste What does this mean? What does not being a capitalist mean? That being a community mean? That they are looking for to cover their working necessities, of health necessities, school necessities, security. The money that they earn of the work that they make, they use it to live better, not to have more money individually or their companies, but for their own community to live better. They have this great wisdom because they are connected with the earth all the time. All the material that they use is what we call organic. But the truth is, they're natural fibers, plants, everything that comes from the earth. So their work is really underestimated. So, in fact, this work in the textile industry, the work of the women in the textile industry. So, imagine the indigenous women that they don't have access to education, they don't have access. I was listening, for example, that they don't get money. They're not allowed to get a loan because they generate their own companies, their own industries, because there's no trust. Because since they're indigenous, there's no trust that they can pay back. When there are indigenous women that are very bright and they're working wonderful work. So this topic about the indigenous women is very beautiful, but it's completely full of unfairness. So we're gonna deepen down in this a little bit more, but since we're running out of time, we want to give you some examples of these working designers that are working with the indigenous communities. And so, Maria, tell us what you have. Well, these women, since it's the Women's Week, they're also men designers, talking about sustainability and also talking with indigenous women and making definitely the circularity economy. We have some important women, and we would like to mention some countries that are trying. There are a lot of women, but we're gonna try that every program to bring you somebody or mention them to recognize their work. Let's start with Dul Romero. This is she's from Honduras, who works hand to hand, and she was participating in a lot of fairs in Europe and Spain with Agatha Ruiz of Praga. Very nice, because she was talking about their Hope Whispers collection. Why is it Hope Whispers? Because she believes in the protection of the planet, and because she also works, like you were mentioning, with the indigenous culture, which is Lenca from her country. What does she do? In her designs, she adds, she decorates with some ornaments of these confections from these indigenous women. So she is supporting the labor of these women. And definitely she also works only with sustainable topic. She tries every time. Remember that everything ethical and natural, it's almost impossible, but you can also make it. The important thing is that they're doing something about it, and they have already started already. And they're using their indigenous women, which are women, very brave women, and they play an important role here. Let's continue with Diana Ramirez from Paraguay. She only works with natural textiles and with recycling from polyester. So she has a combination of both. She is in the circular economy. Everything that is recycled of polyester, we're going to use it again, and we also continue with the circle. We're going to tell you in our email. Also, we're going to tell you their names and their Instagram, so you can also get there. Obviously, we cannot give it to you right now because of the time. And we have Annie Chain from Panama. She's from Panama. She definitely has all her design in the art craft and sustainable fashion. Very nice things. She also works with the textures from different materials, and her creations are savage style from the nature. She has shown in a lot of runways very nice work, very pretty, and yeah, good for Annie Chain. We also have, it has nothing to do with the indigenous women, but we can also mention her really fast. Maria Luisa Ortiz from Colombia. She's doing something very nice, really nice work with the United Nations, also with the universities of Colombia. They got a manifesto for, was imagine, every year 360,000 uniforms of the national policy were wasted, burned, cut, and because they were not useful anymore. So what they do, what she did was she picked everything. She gave work to a lot of workshops to these poor neighborhoods. So they take away all these batches and everything, and they're creating suitcases, pencil cases, and they're already in all the shopping stores in Colombia. So we're doing a circular economy. There has been a lot of support and really nice. At this moment, they're giving work to some people. Not this designer specifically with the indigenous, but also but this is really good. A big applause for her. We also have Yaosca Jimenez from Nicaragua. Her designs are mystical and modern. They're from organic cotton from Africa. So all her designs are made of cotton from Africa. Time is running out on us. Jackie Perez is from Puerto Rico. She also works with sustainable fashion. Basically, her pieces also have applications from decorations from indigenous women. But not only that, but she also uses working from people with very low resources. She's giving work, so she's making a social work, and right after what happened in Puerto Rico with the hurricane. We also have Juliana Morales from Colombia. She's also working with swimming suits for all the family, and it turns out that these swimming suits have gold incrustations and pretty things like that. But the nicest thing is that all this work are done by girls from jail. So by the time that when these women work in these projects, their time is reduced. So this is for people that are having a bad time. They can do something good and do something for their lives. We continue with, we have the last one. Her name is Maria Cle. She is from Mexico, and her product is called Huitzil by Maria Cle. These are some ponchos and huipiles, beautiful, handmade by women from Chiapas, from the Cancun community. This community is called Paisanas Women Silukpak. These are made of cotton, and the designs are repeated, but the decorations, all these ponchos are different. That they use the waste loom weaving to make these. They all turn out to be different. So this is the beauty of this work, of this indigenous work, of this art craft. Is unique work. Our art pieces, it's a sculpture that our indigenous are still maintaining live. I think it's a connection between all of our cultures and us that we're a little bit outside and a little bit disconnected. They keep us alive. They're connecting us with through their work that a lot of the times are expressed in their textiles, in their clothes. And well, sometimes they need a little help. For example, the work that Maria is doing is to bring money back to these communities. And every time that a poncho or a huipil is sold, eh, they get a bonus. And the etiquette of this whipple, it says the name of the woman that did this. So when this is sold, they get this extra bonus. Maria has a dream that this community can get enough back so they can have working opportunities and working education. So they're doing this intense job. There's still a lot to do, and there's a lot of things that we can share of specific topics. Unfortunately, time is over. We have exceeded a little bit more, but we're gonna continue with the women topic next week. We have a very special guest. Her name is Michelle. Her brand is the Roja Vainilla. Her name is Michelle Townsend, and she works with indigenous women making from recycled material. They make purses and other articles, but everything is with recycled material, and she also works with indigenous women. So we're gonna have her here, very happy, so that she can tell us what of the work that she's doing. So we're leaving now. We are we're leaving. Thank you very much for being with us. It is a pleasure every Wednesday to be able to share all this information, to inspire you, to get inspired, everybody. We can all make a change so we can help little by little. We have a special guest. We're going to try to give her the space and have guests every program. So welcome all the proposals that you guys have. If you want us to bring somebody to the program, we're very happy to share it with you. Please remember to subscribe to mariaarrieta.net in our next email. We're going to send you all the resources that we talked about today, the links so you can find the works of all these designers that we have been talking about. And today we have to say goodbye. Have a great day, and we'll see you here next week. Nice week for everybody.